Before we jump into the episode today, I want to share something with you from my heart. First of all, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I really can't tell you how much your support means to me. We've been doing the podcast now for almost 4 years. I can't even believe it. And I'm so grateful for each and every single one of you that listens, shares an episode with your friends, sends me a DM or a text message letting me know how an episode resonated with you or any aha moments. Seriously, I couldn't be more grateful to be able to create this podcast. It has been such a blessing in my life, and I love hearing the ways it's been able to provide value in yours as well. One thing you might not know is how much work it takes to be consistent with a podcast. In fact, did you know that the majority of podcasts don't make it past episode number 10? And we are well beyond that. And it's just a lot thinking of the episodes, recording them, editing them, managing the guests, making sure that everything runs smoothly and gets uploaded consistently and regularly. And so that's why I have created an amazing opportunity for you to support the podcast monetarily. And in exchange for that, you will get exclusive premium subscriber content. So for as little as $3 a month, you can become a premium subscriber of the podcast. And every month I will upload new voice-guided workouts and breathwork meditation audio for you. So that way you can work out with me, coaching you in your ears. You can also take a moment to reduce your stress and relax and come down and ground down with one of my breathwork audios. So if that is on your heart to support the podcast for as little as $3 a month to become a premium podcast subscriber, I can't tell you how much that means to me and the growth of this podcast. I appreciate you. If you're interested, click the link in the description, become a premium podcast subscriber, new content every month, and while supplies last, I'll send you an exclusive podcast coffee mug so you can have your self-love and sweat coffee every morning. I appreciate you. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast, the place where you'll get inspired to live your life unapologetically, embrace your perfect imperfections, break down barriers, and do what sets your soul on fire. I'm your host, London Souza. Hey friend, it's me, London Souza, online lifestyle transformation coach. I help people all over the world just like you who know they are meant for more, get their mind right and their body tight, and go from crazy busy to crazy happy. And hey, if it's our first time meeting, welcome. So happy to have you. And if you've been with us for a while, it's so great that you're here too. I'm really excited to share this episode of the Self-Love and Sweat podcast with you. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Aelin as our special guest. Aelin is a sacred embodiment coach, facilitator, writer, motivational speaker, and the TV host for her show, Fiercely Empowered. She has been in the spiral of self-development, healing, and personal evolution since experiencing anxiety and panic disorder back in 2014. After facing one of the most traumatic events of her life, she became empowered to share her message and work with women on mindset and anxiety relief. That soon evolved into embodiment and working with the wild women archetype as she deep dived into her own spiritual journey and what that meant for her. She became passionately involved with guiding women back home to their body, truth, and inner wild. Some of her favorite ways to work with women are with archetypal energy, embodiment, emotional alchemy, and sacral energy for creative self-expression. Her work has led her to speak in numerous programs and on the multitude of podcasts worldwide and working with women from all over the globe. She has become a fierce voice for feminine liberation. Her work has also brought her back to the true meaning of sisterhood, community, and collaboration. Outside of her work, you can find her flying around on aerial skills and trapeze arts, writing, cozying up with a good book and a nice cup of tea. And her favorite way to spend time is with her husband of almost 10 years and with their 3 fur babies. Aelin, welcome to the podcast. So happy to have you. How are you? How's it going? Where are you?
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me on the Self Love and Sweat podcast. I am so grateful to be here, and I am currently located in the greater Houston area of Texas.
I love that. Tell us about you and how I know I read, it was kind of a longer bio, but I always say, send me the juicy bios for the podcast because I love just reading that as I prepare for these, interviews, not just like the questions, but just thinking about, hey, who am I going to be talking with? And who is this person? And these amazing stories that people, I feel like, so courageously come on, like you guys, just to share these amazing stories. But, what are you doing now? So this whole, the whole intro, I kind of, gave some background on you, which has led to where you are now. What are you doing? How are you showing up? And what is this wild woman archetype that you are creating, embodying, and helping other women do so as well?
Oh, thank you so much for that introduction. And by the way, I just fine-tuned that introduction because I had not touched it in a while. And I was like, this is perfect. This is the perfect time to put out there a new bio. So thank you for that. Man, right now I am deep into embodiment work. I am very deep into this next level of evolution and growth for myself as I am embarking in new chapters and new territories with a TV show and this wild woman archetype that I have been navigating for a while. And I feel like right now I'm showing up just so unapologetically. I am showing up, showing out. I'm releasing expectations, releasing attachments, and just being all of who I am and embodying like the fullness of me as I show up. And that has been a lot of the wild woman archetype because in my background, I came from kind of the family that was check off the boxes, kind of do as you're told. This is the way we've always done things. You go to school, go to college. There's no thinking about not going to college. You're going to college and then you get married, you get the regular job. And for my whole life, I feel like I've kind of just been checking off these boxes, and not necessarily because I wanted to make my parents proud, because I was told to do that. Like I didn't know anything else. But as I started to grow up, I started to realize I'm like, okay, there's something wrong here. And there's something that doesn't feel right. It's like puzzle pieces weren't clicking together, and there was never an aliveness. There was never a fulfillment deep within. It was more of just following that assembly line. And so I started navigating my own journey when I experienced panic and anxiety. And then that kind of just blossomed into personal development, my inner growth, my inner personal evolution into spirituality later on. But like the wild woman recently has been a reclamation of just this. It's a reclamation of my intuition. It's a reclamation of my wild. It's a reclamation of like my truth and who I am. And it goes so deep. It goes so deep. And if you're open to it, I do have something that is a part of my work that I wrote, that if someone's like, what is the wild woman archetype? Like just in like 2 paragraphs, I can share that too for the listener who's curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say for sure, read that. And then also like, you said, I'm deep in the embodiment work. For those people listening that might be like, okay, well, what is embodiment work? What does that mean? How do I know if I'm doing it? What's an example of embodiment work? So maybe you could cover both of those things, and feel free to read whatever you want to, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll share the wild woman archetype first. So the wild woman is deeply in touch with her intrinsic nature, as well as the ebbs and flows of her rhythms and cycles. She is our intrinsic roots, honoring our raw energy, weaving medicine through song, movement, and intuition. She is stepping bravely into the untamed nature of our authentic truth and power. She is the unwillingness to comply or conform to society's pressures or labels. She is the audacious return to our primal nature. She is the independent beating of our own drum, the original OG rebel howling at the moon, a call back home to our wild-hearted souls. And that, my loves, is the wild woman archetype, but you can't put her in a box. So I don't want to put her in a box. I don't want to limit her. She's boundless and she's limitless. So that is a little definition. If anybody was wondering, that's something that I just channeled for one of my programs. But moving into the embodiment piece, oh my gosh, I didn't know what embodiment was when I saw this word everywhere. And for me, it is honoring and experiencing the full spectrum of our emotions and the sensations within our body, and really inhabiting ourselves more fully, like owning the full spectrum of our emotions, owning the full spectrum of what we experience, the felt sense in our body. And also, embodiment is I'm pausing here to catch up with my mind. It's good.
Yeah,
it's going. It's
I'm
flowing.
taking notes too. Those that are listening who can't see me, but I'm like looking off to the side on my notebook, like, yeah, honoring what's happening,
Present moment.
being in the present moment. And you said owning the full spectrum. I love that. And I love the word ownership. I often talk about empowering ownership. Like, I'm the common denominator, like stop pointing the finger, and I think embodiment, I love how you said that, like owning the full spectrum. That word, ownership and owning there. Just for some reason, my journey has spoken to me. And so I like that you said that there, but yes, continue.
Yeah. And it's this awareness. It's more of this being the witness and being more aware of what is moving through, what we are experiencing. I mean, we really are in a society that it's so fast paced. There's things coming at us from all different angles. And for a lot of us, myself, I'm still moving through this of really just dropping from my head and into my body. And it's like, how can we expand with our breath? How can we feel more with our breath? How can we let our breath wrap around our heart more gently and just be in that moment? Because we try to escape so much. I think there's a lot of escapism, and there's a lot of like living in our head, like just this lead with logic. Well, okay, great. But at the same time, we're being taught that teaches us to ignore our intuitive sense. And when we're not inhabiting the fullness of our body, that's when we have the dis-ease and the discomfort and all the things with anxiety and overwhelm. And it's as simple as pausing and being with your breath. It's as simple as, if your chest is tight, being with that sensation, feeling into that sensation, being like, what is this trying to tell me right now? Like, what is the message here? And what does it need from me right now? And if you go a layer deeper, you can always take it a layer deeper and be like, this is fear. My fear lives in my chest. Okay, well, I'm experiencing fear. Not that it is our fear, like we're always whole. Like it's not necessarily, it's just a part of us and it's emotion, but it's not who we are. And we can take that such a layer deeper and then just start communicating with fear. Like, what does it feel like? When does it show up? What does it need from me right now? Like, it's just, and it's not so much logically trying to process like the narratives and the stories and all the things. It's really just being with it. And that's the hardest thing with embodiment, because I've done rituals, practices, sessions, and it's so weird at first because some people, even me, I'm like, I'm not getting this. Like, it's not clicking. But after a while, we start, it really is a habit and something that we have to do and flex our embodiment muscle all the time, because we're so used to being our head. If you start feeling into the felt sense, you're like, I have no idea what this is. And I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling right now. That's actually really good. You're opening yourself up to like a new portal of awareness when you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling right now. Well, that opens you up. Like, that's a gateway already.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like I have to pause too to absorb a lot of what you're saying. I love it. And it's so cool. And like I said, I'm taking a ton of notes. And what I feel like embodiment is, and what you've said and we've talked about, is, owning the present moment and kind of what's in it. And I think that's another thing that you mentioned too, is like in the definition, I think it was, of the wild woman, was owning with the rhythms and cycles and kind of the flow of that. And that really speaks to me too, because, I was having conversations, I think it was with my boyfriend. Yeah, it was my boyfriend, and just with my best friend too. We'll often talk about, rewriting stories, having the awareness of patterns, noticing our loops. And I said in your bio that you're like deep in, personal development, and you do this personal development work and you find, these loops or patterns or whatever. And then there's still every single day, moment by moment, where we get to like, I always refer back to the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie, when he's like, strike that, reverse it, like where you catch yourself in that moment and you're like, wait, like I want to do better and I want to show up better. And it's not just a matter of like swiping. it's not just like you get better at swiping the emotions under the rug or having better coping mechanisms. It's just kind of like you're more cool with and ready to, just kind of be with whatever's coming up. Because in that process of becoming who you want to be and implement, all those things, it's like there's still the day-to-day life. There's still the day-to-day interactions with ourselves and others. And so, embodiment and anything that really reminds me to be present and slow down is super helpful for me, because that's not what the programming was before I was like,
absolutely,
intervened and kind of realize how important that was. And so a lot of what you're saying is very cool for me to hear. One of the things that you said too is like moving from being so much in our head and listening to our body. Do you mean being in our head? You mentioned feelings of anxiety or repeating thoughts, or what do you mean about being in our head? And then why do we need to get into our body?
Yeah. So being in our head for me, because I experienced it with, and I feel like maybe this definition could be different for some people, but for me, it was the overwhelm of just like repeating thoughts or going over things over and over again. And it's like the mind is never stopping at all. Like it's just constant. And it is. I mean, we're alive, right? Mm-hmm. The only time it should stop is if we're not. But it was a matter of just being in my head and completely disconnecting from my body. I have been so numb for a really long time from my body. And I never realized that until I started dropping into my body. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my thighs are stiff, my pelvic bowl, my hips, all of this is like really stiff. My shoulders are stiff. And so when we bridge this connection from like the mind body connection, we actually can become so much more open and aware to all the experiences that we are having. And if we're not open and aware to the experiences that we're having, we do create our own like self-suffering and self-sabotage, because it's like this repetitive cycle over and over again. But if we can just open and expand to our body and be with that present moment, that is when we tip over from like having like little mini breakthroughs to transformation. Mm-hmm. The transformation is in the connection, and it's really not something you can even logically process. It's felt, it's experienced. And I don't even think you can put it into words, but it is saying, okay, these thoughts are kind of on a loop and this is what's happening. I'm going to ground down. I'm going to attune to my breath. I'm going to sink into my body, and I'm going to just explore. Like we don't even have to fix anything. We don't have to try to change anything. It's more of just becoming aware of what's showing up for us in that moment. Mm-hmm. And it creates a deeper capacity for us to experience the full spectrum of our emotions. It creates this, a friend of mine, Megan, she's beautiful, emotional alchemist. She always calls it emotional safety. And if we can be, it's not necessarily that we're afraid of things that might happen and how our mind is running. It's that we don't want to just sit with that emotion. We don't want to sit with discomfort. We don't want to sit with it. We're trying to escape feeling the emotion, mm-hmm. and we can't. We can't afford to do that anymore as a society.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Not just not feeling the emotion or having an unhealthy coping mechanism, but also blaming others or it's their fault.
Yeah.
That's a topic I love to talk about. Okay. So a couple of things. Okay. So quick question, because I'm curious and I'm also exploring this even more. And if you have something to share on it, cool. If not, cool. Okay. So I got really deep into the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, which I love his meditation practices and these heart opening practices. And then we've been really getting into heart math. And I just downloaded this Audible book that I've listened to 7 chapters of, 13 so far. So and when I'm listening to audiobooks, I'm kind of multitasking. So by no means an expert in this space, but I've definitely think I know what this familiar feeling that is we are, doing in these practices. And so when I think of getting out of my head and into my body, it's really for me getting out of like the monkey mind and really into my heart. And so that for me is just super interesting and something I'm practicing. So I don't know if that's interesting for you or something that you do, or if you have something to share on that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the heart is, oh my gosh, it's just a portal to abundance. It's a portal to unconditional love, compassion, all the things. And I feel like it is a gateway. It's a gateway to so much. And when we are getting out of that monkey mind and dropping into our heart, there's something about it that really cracks open, that really it's a feeling almost that you can't describe, mm-hmm. but there's like this comfort and peace here. And an overwhelming sense of like joy and love. And I do think there's a connection between the mind, the heart, and the body as well. I mean, they are all like spirals, right? Within, like, I call it like the Holy Trinity, you know? So when we are dropping out of the mind and we are feeling more into our heart, I think it allows for us to have so much more compassion for ourselves, and we get to look at the world in a different way. Like we see the world in a different way, and we have so much more compassion with other people around us. And that changes how not only that we interact with ourselves, but the world around us. So it's like that internal landscape. If that flower bed and you're like working to it, tending to it, it is going to reflect in the external, and that monkey mind over time becomes a lot quieter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing on that. And just in this ever, like you said, we said in your bio, and you mentioned too, just like always self-development and learning. And that seems to be an area that I've really been called and feel great exploring. And I feel like that the feeling of that heart coherence when I explore that even more. So it's been fun. It's been like you said, very joyous, kind of blissful experience getting out of that monkey mind into the body. And it took a while, right? I was like practicing a lot, doing the meditations a lot, like sit, stay, and just putting myself through these, like, I felt like my body was sometimes contorting through feelings of like, get up, go do this, go think about this, go over here. So it wasn't easy, but now it's a really fun and cool process. So now I want to talk about kind of this good girl archetype. And one of the things that you maybe said, or I just wrote down because of something that you said in the beginning of how it was like, I didn't know. And I would say this is similar to something that I experienced growing up too, with the way that I was raised, is like, I didn't know how to not do what I was told. And it wasn't like, because I mean, of course there were consequences. My parents were very strict and consistent. We have a really great relationship today. They did best with the tools that they have, all the things, but it wasn't like I was like scared or, in worst cases, abused or forced to do what, it was just kind of like, I didn't know how to not, go to school, get the good grades, do the right thing. And of course I made mistakes and did dumb stuff and, rebelled, whatever, but like really had that mentality and to check the boxes. It was just kind of like, oh, report card, look at what I got, and then as I got older, it was like, oh, no one's checking the check boxes and no one gives a shit if my boxes are checked. And that was like a moment where I was kind of like, oh, and I see where that came from, and a little bit of that good girl mentality, also like good student mentality. So as I was reading more and more about you and the archetypes and stuff you were describing and stuff, one of them was that good girl kind of mentality, or that good girl archetype. So how can we love her? How can I love my good girl archetype a little bit more?
Oh my goodness. There's such a purpose for her. Like, I always say all these archetypes and the things that they're such a beautiful way to help us understand ourselves and society more. And there's so much we can learn from their energy, and we can love on her. I think it's one of those things I talk about, dissolving the good girl and like unmasking the good girl. And I don't mean that in a way where we're sipping on haterade and we're hating on her, but she is an important part of our journey because she teaches us so much. And then it's at one point we got to be like, I love you, but I kind of need to walk more into whole woman. I need to go from good girl to whole woman or wild woman, whatever you want to call her. But she's so critical because a lot of us growing up, and I mean, I haven't met one person that hasn't had at least something of the good girl where they were like, oh yeah, that's totally me, like perfection or, biting your tongue, making sure everybody else is okay. And then you come last. That's like self-sacrificing, making sure that you appear a certain way. Like just, there's so many aspects to her, but they're so ingrained. And if you think about it, our mothers and mothers before them and generations before, there's been all of this ancestral behaviors and patterns that get passed down to us. And it is ingrained on a cellular level. It really is. And so when you talk about that programming and how strong it is strong. But let me tell you the authentic truth. And when you tap into your heart and your body, like all of that is so much stronger than the programming. And we just have to stop giving it power over us. And that's when I realized, okay, what are these behaviors and patterns? Perfection, like not saying my truth, doing what I'm told without questioning it, kind of like being passive and like afraid to break like rules. And I started just going down this list, and I started being like, this is a good girl. This is a mask, and it's a prison with no walls, because that's how ingrained it is. Like, it's a mental prison with no walls, because that's how ingrained it has been in all of us since we were young. It's like the keys, like the doors are always open. There are no walls. We've just been here and we didn't know that we could actually step out. So when I started stepping out, I'm like, okay, I'm speaking my truth. I'm doing things that are unconventional. I'm kind of saying no to the status quo. I'm listening more to my intuition. And a lot of that good girl, it ends up telling us to override our intuition and that others know better than us. And that for me was such a big one. That was like, I have always outsourced my power. I'm going to be so authentic on here. I have always been like, help me. I need help. I don't know what to do, or tell me what to do, or tell me these choices. And it's like, oh my goodness, when I pulled that back and I started just tapping into my heart and dropping into my body and being like, is this a full body? Heck yes. Or is this a full body? Heck no. And I know best, and I know me best. It really changed a lot for me.
Yes. And to get to that point where you can, confidently say like, I know me best has been so important and so powerful in my life. And you put in I came from a fitness background. It's like you put in the reps somewhere already. So now it's like identifying where you're putting in the reps, putting them somewhere else. And then, like you said, oh, I can't believe, like, that was, there's like a part of you where you're like, that was me before. That's how I, was, or those were the things that, I was embodying and whatever. And, it's just kind of, a moment of like, oh, I can't, I'm a true believer in change and, becoming the version of yourself that you want to be. And it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong or add anything to it, but a lot of that embodiment work too is like in that change process. It's like, I often will say like, practice being it, like try it on. Like sometimes when you got from that point of where you used to be, help me. And here you are now, it's like, there was that practicing and trying on and the checking in with the body and the, the cues that allow you to then say like, okay, I know best. And so sometimes that can feel funky, but that process is so necessary because you have to really be like, who do I want to be and what would she do next? And who am I and what would I do next? To where you're kind of like those kind of meet. And then you really feel maybe that full embodiment. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, oh my goodness. That's another thing Dr. Joe Dispenza I love about him is like embodying like the future feeling now. And a lot of that is in the work with embodiment. Once we kind of get past like the emotions and the felt sensations and understanding that, it's like, okay, there's this version of me and this is what it feels like. And it's like, how can we bring that into our present day reality? It's in the simplest things. It's in routines. It's in saying yes when we truly want to say yes. It's in saying no when we really want to say no. And it's like, that is the embodiment. We're bringing that into the 3D, like we're bringing that into our reality. And what I really love about it too, is that it's not necessarily someone that's outside of us. I always used to separate, like there's this future version of me and like, I'm reaching, I'm gotta just like, I'm pulling
I'm
at this
not there
tug.
yet.
Yeah, I'm not there yet. And I have to remember too, a lot of this journey for me, my perspective is just coming home. It's coming home. It's a reintroduction. It's a relearning of really who I am. It's always who I've been, but I just had the programming and the conditioning and life kind of gets in the way.
Yes. I love that. So so powerful. Feelings. Those are, without getting into too much of it, but in feeling that you mentioned, that future gratitude for that has been so powerful in my life. And then also understanding, unpacking, unraveling, identifying feelings has been really powerful in my life.
Oh, absolutely.
For you too. So one of the things that you mentioned right before we kind of pressed record, just, in passing a little bit, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. As we were chatting just before. But, now, as I mentioned in your bio, you have a TV show. So you're on camera, you're doing TV stuff, you're sharing your work and providing value that way, which is so incredible. And one thing that you said, you were like, I was at a desk and a mic for years, and I was really comfortable doing that. And now I've stepped into TV. And I think that, anyone listening, if you've ever been into a space, and I've had a lot of really great guests on this topic of like this pivot of like, okay, now, and my dad was a coach, a baseball coach, you wear cleats. I always think of this pivot of just like rooting down into that dirt and making that rotational move and going towards, a slightly different direction or a different calling that somehow feels right, has that familiar, feeling. But, also stepping into that unknown can be super uncomfortable, super scary. Plus, in general, like I said, I think we can all relate maybe in some form or another to a pivot or a change. But I also personally can relate to what it's like to be on camera and be on TV and to show up that way, not only, just to do your job, but you're like physically that, and it's your face and it's your body and your energy and all of those different types of things. So yeah, how's that been going for you? And what does it feel like stepping out of your comfort zone? What new things are you discovering about yourself? And, what's been like the best part and also maybe the scariest part? I don't know.
I appreciate you so much for all of that. And it's just such a reminder for me that there's always something new. There's always deeper levels that we can go to putting in the work and figuring out like, okay, this next move, this is out of my comfort zone. Like there's always something new and there's always a new chapter. And this has really humbled me because I'm so used to, like you said, being behind a desk. And I've been behind a desk and a mic for years. And then getting on camera was really scary because I'm like, they're looking at me and there is an energetic to it as well. So I was like, I know I can do this, but expanding my comfort zone, like deepening my capacity to do the scary things and feel the fear, but do it anyways. I'm like, I know I have to do this because it has been called to me. I've wrote about it in journals. In 2019, I wrote that I would have my own TV show. Never knew that this would actually like come to fruition. And so there's been some resistance. There's been some of the monkey mind being in my head, but it's like pulling out all of those practices and knowing that I can't ignore this resistance because it's going to persist and it's going to get bigger. So how can I move through this resistance? How can I kind of dissolve it and move through? Because I don't think there's any going around resistance. We really have to move through it. And so I'm like, how can I make this more gentle and easy on myself? And it was more of, I'm going to show up as authentically as possible. And I think that was the toughest part is moving through that resistance. I'm going to show up as authentically as possible. And I'm going to know that I'm divinely meant for this room. I am meant to be in this space and I wouldn't have been given this opportunity if it wasn't meant for me. And I'm like, there are so many people right now that would absolutely kill to have just landed the opportunity that you had too. And it's like, feel into your heart, you were meant for this. And walk in that room like you own it, like you were meant to be there. And that really shifted a lot in my body. I could feel my body relax a lot. And the first episode was actually on the comfort zone because I was like, hey, y'all, I'm doing something new.
Yes. And really like with starting anything new, starting in the baby pool, starting small, out of the comfort zone, just like is really how you feel anyways. That's always a great place to start in terms of topics to talk about. And I hope, you never know. I hope that people are actively doing things that are challenging their comfortability, their beliefs, their comfort zone. So then when listening to this, they're like, oh no, I know what that feels, that fish out of water feeling, that, just kind of, uncomfortable feeling.
And it's also getting really comfortable with being uncomfortable and knowing that realistically, like what's the worst that could actually happen? Like, maybe it's not for me, or maybe I flub my words or whatever, but it's like, I'd rather try and fail forward than to have not even tried something that my heart's like, wow, you wrote about this like 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago.
I love that you did that, where sometimes things just come out and you're like, that's weird. And now here it is. When you wrote it down in 2019, did you want to do that then? Like in 2019, where you were like, oh, I want to have a TV show then? Or was it just something that came to you where you're like, that's interesting? And do you think like can you see why now 2022 was like the much better time for that to happen versus then?
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. I think that's something I've always wanted for a really long time. But in 2019, I actually started to like journal about it. I started to really think on it. And I'm like, man, I'd love my own TV show. I really feel like I'm one of those people. I love connection. I love to talk. And I knew if I had a TV show or if I was literally the person that was just interviewing people on the red carpet, like all day, I would thrive. It doesn't matter who they are. I don't care that they're celebrities or whatever. I just love connecting. So I'd always been like TV show, like on TV, like broadcast live. And then it's funny though, because back then I was not in a space for it. I think angels and ancestors, like universe was like, okay, baby girl, we got you, but it's not going to happen right now. Mm-hmm. And I knew when it landed, it was like it's meant to happen right now. And a lot of that I feel like has been the embodiment work, the, really harmonizing my nervous system, getting to know my emotions on such a deeper level and understand what they're trying to convey and just how they're messengers. And then also just stepping into a lot of unapologetic, authentic rawness, that wild woman. It's like the universe always has these like plans for us, but sometimes they don't happen in the time that we want them to, because I don't ever feel like they're going to give us something that we're not ready to handle. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I knew back then there was no way. I was still navigating limbos and feeling stuck sometimes and lost and like a whole hot mess express, but there was always, there's always a message in the mess, but yeah, I was definitely not ready then, but absolutely now.
Yeah. Yeah. I ask because there's been moments like that for me where something hasn't happened, or I've written it down and it didn't happen right then, but it did later. Or maybe I've experienced some frustration because I'm like, I want it, now. And then it comes later and you're like, oh yeah, way better timing. So much more like I needed to learn and experience and whatever. Okay. Quick question, because I love talking to you. Or I shouldn't even say quick question, but just something that I want to ask you because, a lot of cool stuff is coming up for me. Okay. So when you said you wrote it down in 2019, and I shared this story because this has happened to me and I'm kind of realizing it now. And I think this is also what's kind of exciting about following your heart, or this intuition, or like that, where you said, like, I know this is right for me kind of feeling. So there's the good girl, but then there's also like the rebel girl, I think. And maybe it was actually the wild child or the wild woman. And as you're talking about it, I feel like I want to like re-identify that part that I've maybe identified as kind of the, the rebel. But a big part of my why, in terms of how I show up in the world, the career decisions I was making, a lot of the things, just kind of, creating a why and embodying it, and like just being like, this is what I want my life to look like, things like that. I was like, I want to be able to, time freedom was really huge for me. I was like, I want to be able to work from anywhere in the world, manage my own schedule, go visit my family, friends, people I want, whenever I want. And initially it was like a desire for an outcome that I didn't know yet. Cause from at that point, it was like the rebel child. It was like, I'm sick of asking for days off. I don't want a boss. I want to manage my time. I want to do this. Like, ain't nobody going to tell me what to do. I'm not coming on Friday if I don't want to. Wednesday's my weekend if I want, just like this. I do not, kind of a teenager, rebellious rebel girl kind of mentality. But later on, fast forward, somehow she came up with that and protected that with some, energy or whatever vibe she was putting out there, that rebel girl kind of thing. And now fast forward, I'm 33 years old. My brother has a daughter. So I have a niece that my family and my brother and the mother of my niece and her mother are very involved in raising her. And so now I'm like, oh, this is so cool, because if I didn't have this rebel wild child kind of in me that was adamant about protecting this, not knowing I would want to be there to like spend weeks with my niece or my family or things like that. And then my boyfriend, he lives on the East Coast and I live on the West Coast. So I'm doing kind of this like bi-coastal back and forth thing, which also wouldn't have been possible without this, time freedom and ability to kind of do what I want. And so I'm in this process of kind of like appreciating as currently I am working on remolding and improving and just getting more clear on my why, knowing that was something where I'm like, oh yeah, like homegirl protected that with her life. She was like adamant that she was not going to have a boss and not going to be, told what to do or yes or no, or these are your working hours or not. And that's really where that came out of. But now I'm like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, girl, like good job for doing that, because now here I am where it's like, okay, now I can, be there for the people that I love. And so I'm like, okay, yeah. So that's been something that's coming up for me. And I think it's like kind of allows us to kind of appreciate not only that good girl, but kind of that rebel. And then maybe someone listening, I don't know, is just kind of like, I have this desire for this. And it's just like that fire in my heart or that fire, and it's kind of like sometimes just knowing like, I'm going to lean into it just because that somehow like feeling feels familiarly good, but I don't know what that outcome's going to be. And so, yeah, I think I just wanted to share that because it was helpful what you said to kind of process that for myself. And then also probably someone listening could be navigating in that same, kind of space.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like a transition like space. It's like leaning into the next chapter just a little bit and like kind of dipping our toe just a little bit. And I think that's a good way to start is how can I lean a little bit into this fire? How can I lean more into this, like this sensation that I'm feeling and like this desire? And it's so good to take it slow, take some baby steps. Sometimes I feel like if we do something like really drastic, it can actually re-traumatize our nervous system. And it's a lot. Some people, maybe they can rip the Band-Aid off and they're fine. I, on the other hand, have been getting more familiar with like kind of just like the small stretches, not the huge, huge ones. But I think it's really important to remember that like those nudges, those breadcrumbs, those desires, like they're there for a reason. And whatever it may be in your life, whether it's writing, it's poetry, it's art, it's teaching, or it's going back to school and actually getting the degree that you actually always wanted, anything. I don't want to like limit it to like the entrepreneurial space or like being a coach, but it's like follow those breadcrumbs. And it's like, what is one step you can take today? Is it the research phase? Like, what is this going to entail? Like the more passion and the more time. And I don't want to say like necessarily like efforting like hard, but like it's eat it, live it, breathe it, be it. And that's exactly what I have been doing with the Wild Woman, with embodiment and TV and like coaching. I'm like, how can I like pull all of this and like eat it, breathe it, live it like every single day, even if it's a breadcrumb, even if it's leaning into it just a little bit. And that really helps us become more familiar with that, so that when we do like lean fully into it, we're going to have some familiar feelings. We're going to have this familiar like, oh, okay, like now it's just I'm leaning into it all the way. And it does have a really good impact on our nervous system as well, because I'm really big on making sure your nervous system is really good and you're deepening the capacity to hold yourself in the scary moments.
Yes. Because nobody wants to be like, I'm doing the embodiment work, to keep that calm nervous system and in that parasympathetic and doing things like you said, if you need to just like rip that Band-Aid off just a little bit because the hairs are pulling and you don't want to pull it too much, we all know what that I feel like. And some people are just more like you said, just go for it. And so finding the pace and flow that works best for you.
Absolutely. And it gets to be fun.
Yeah, it gets to be fun. And I always call it, or I've been calling it lately, like a dance. I'm dancing with. Yes. That's what I tell my coach. I've been dancing with. And he laughs at me because he's like, you're just always dancing. I'm like, yeah, it's much better than me. Like I'm stuck between, or I'm choosing, I don't know, I'm challenged with. I'm like, I'm dancing between the idea of maybe this or a little bit of this, or this is what's coming. So,
and I love dancing. Fun. So I loved it. Yeah, that's dancing, movement, all of that like is some of my favorite things. So if we can just dance our way through life, I think we would just be so much better off, really, instead of I'm stuck, I can't move, or like this is hard, like just dance your way through it.
Yeah. Dance it out. Yeah. Sometimes, physical movement, whether it's dance or anything, really helps us move through a lot of things. So I always feel like it's such a great tool. But Aelin, thank you so much for being here on the podcast and for this powerful conversation and for, answering all of my questions and just, being who you are. This is super cool. I'm so excited to have you here with us. Thankful that you're here, and congrats on the show and just stepping into a new opportunity to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And let us know how we can connect with you on social media, website, anything that we should know. Share it with us now.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate so much being on the Self Love and Sweat podcast and just having this conversation with you. It's been absolutely beautiful. And I knew just from listening, I was listening to episodes of you, I was like binging and I'm like, okay, this is amazing. You do wonderful, wonderful work and you're a great host. So thank you. And you can reach me on Instagram and my handle is I am Aelin _ and Aelin is AELIN and then a little underscore after. And then my website is www.sacredwildyou.com. And that is in progress and it's being built a little bit at a time, but there are some cool things on there. And I do have a freebie on there as well. So if you're interested in breath, embodiment, and expanding your capacity to lead from your heart through your awareness, there's a freebie on there as well that I have.
Cool. Perfect. Yes, I know we're interested. So I'll put all the links to social media, website, and that freebie in the show notes or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Thank you so much for being here, Aelin. Thank you guys for listening. If you have any questions, I guess I can't say it for you too, Aelin, but I always say DMs are open. So if you want to shoot me a DM on Instagram or connect with me there, ask any further questions. That's always a great way to, ask questions about the podcast and get connected with Aelin. And thank you so much. And thank you guys for listening. And we'll see you at the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Self Love and Sweat, the podcast. Hey, do me a favor. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, give us a review. This really helps a lot. And share this with a friend. I'm only one person, and with your help, we can really spread the message of self-love and sweat and change more lives all around the world. I'm London Souza, reminding you that you deserve a life full of passion, presence, and purpose, fueled by self-love and sweat. This podcast is a Hit Spot Austria production.